Any thoughts? Why is it important for us to study the book of Daniel and Revelation? You guys can answer because you guys are here. You guys are in this class. Why do you guys think it's important to know this? Are there people here, let me ask this. Are you guys here because you want to know more about Daniel and Revelation? Okay, so nobody's raising their hand, but they're saying yes. So I'll take that as a confirmation. Okay, so here's the reason why prophecy is so important. Okay, and the reason why I love being a Seventh-day Adventist compared to any other denomination, and I'm not saying this to be proud or boastful, but we are a prophetic movement. We're a movement that is born out of prophecy. And one of the key characteristics of God's last day remnant church is that they have the spirit of prophecy, or the gift of prophecy.
We don't know why they have a class right now. But they got the telephone set now. Why short game? Because that was the Lord share message giver. Now, whatever hell Tamalua. You may get up big like Wi-Fi, or something like it, about Wi-Fi now. For them or not, let them all shut down in the windows with the bar, text message or not. Maybe why you know what they can for color.
Oh, thank you. All right. So here's the reason why prophecy is important. Now here's a quote from Evangelism, page 196. It says, "Ministers should present the sure word of prophecy as a foundation of the faith of Seventh-day Adventists." So prophecy should be the very bedrock foundation of our faith. If you ever have your faith wavering, if you have doubts about being Seventh-day Adventist, or you have doubts about your relationship with God, when you study prophecy, it helps confirm that God is true. It helps confirm that your faith is something you can rest assured on, because we are a prophetic movement. It says here, the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation should be carefully studied, and in connection with them, the words, "Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world." So when we study prophecy, it's not about beasts, it's not about the Sunday law, it's not about the mark of the beast. All of those things are important, but the real purpose of studying prophecy, based on what this says here, is for us to behold Jesus. To allow Jesus to become more real to us. And in fact, the book of Revelation, which we're going to be studying tomorrow, the book of Revelation actually, just by the name alone, means reveal, a revelation, something that's open to us. And it's the revelation of Jesus Christ that we want to see. And so that's why I love prophecy. Prophecy helps me to see Jesus in a more clearer light, and helps me to also look forward to his coming and also be changed to be more like him. So why study Daniel and Revelation? It says when the books of Daniel and Revelation are better understood, listen to this. If it's better understood, believers will have an entirely different religious experience. In other words, if your religious experience is stagnant and it's nothing happening, it's just dull, study prophecy, study Daniel, Revelation, and you're going to have an entirely different religious experience. How? It says, they will be given such glimpses of the open gates of heaven that the heart and the mind will be impressed with the character that all must develop in order to realize the blessedness in which to be the reward of the pure in heart. And Jesus tells us, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall, what? See God. I want to see God. What about you? Amen. So with that in mind, you see the importance of studying prophecy. And so what I would like you to do is, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to, well, let me ask you this before I tell you what I'm going to do. How many of you guys have ever studied the whole book of Revelation, from chapter 1 through 12? No one. Or is there someone, but they're shy? Someone told me during breakfast this morning that Korean people are kind of shy. Is that true? You're too shy to respond. Yeah, I'm shy too, so don't worry. Okay, so we're all shy together, all right? But what I'm going to do, since I'm going to assume that you guys didn't really study Daniel, the whole book from chapter 1 through 12, I'm going to give you a quick summary of all the chapters so that you get an overview. And I hope that it helps you to be encouraged and motivated to study yourself. Okay, so, and then we'll get into more of chapter 7. Just talk about the beasts. And let me just get prepared here. Alright, so we're talking about the kingdoms. Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, and divided nations, and the kingdom of Christ, right? We talked about that. And so we see that the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, they always use a method called repeat and enlarge. Okay, so in other words, prophecy uses this a lot. Okay, like for example, I don't know if you guys have this problem or you guys can relate to this, but when your parents, when you were a kid, tell you to do something and you don't do it, they have to tell you the second time, right? And you still don't do it. They tell you the third time with more stronger tone of voice and even a threat perhaps, and if you don't do it, you better run for your life, right? But what we want to notice is that the Bible repeats. Whenever something's repeated, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but more than that, that means the Bible is trying to tell you, hey, pay attention. This is very important. Okay? So when it's repeated, that means there's a lot of importance there. Also, if there's a lot of detail, if the Bible takes time to describe something, like not just one verse, but several verses, then that means that's very important as well. And you're going to see an example of that when we study Daniel chapter 7. Okay? But so this whole concept of repeating and enlarging is something that is not new to studying prophecy. So we see in Daniel chapter 2, it talked about the kingdom, all these kingdoms, the stone that was cut without hands destroys the image, and that stone represents what? The kingdom of Jesus, right? The coming of Christ, the second coming. And so we see that in Daniel chapter 2, right, it talks about all the political world kingdoms. Okay, Daniel 2. If you actually look at the whole book of Daniel, there's 12 chapters. You cut it in half. The first 6 chapters deal with stories. And the next 6 chapters deal with prophecy. Right? And so we see that we're going to be focusing on the prophetic books of Daniel. And so Daniel chapter 2 depicts what? The major world kingdoms. Okay, political kingdoms. Okay, Daniel 2. But we see the same thing repeated in Daniel 7. In Daniel 7, though, it's not depicted as metals, but it's depicted as what? Beasts that come out of the sea, right? So we see that these beasts, what do these beasts represent? They represent the same thing as in Daniel chapter 2, but the focus is different. Repeating and enlarging. See, Daniel 2, the image, the kingdoms. But it repeats again, but as it repeats again in Daniel 7, it adds more detail. Okay? Now, we see that these kingdoms, represented by these beasts, okay, so we see here, let's put it here, what does the lion represent? The lion with eagle's wings. Babylon, right? What does the bear represent with 3 ribs in his mouth? Medo-Persia. Okay, what does the leopard with 4 heads represent? Greece. And the dreadful beast, Rome. Okay, and then we see out of the dreadful beast, there's 10 horns, right? And out of the 10 horns, a little horn comes up. That little horn is represented by what? It's papacy, pretty much, right? Okay, so my question to you is this. Why did God use animals to describe the same thing that he mentioned in Daniel chapter 2? So Daniel chapter 2, the image, right? Daniel chapter 7, these beasts. Why does God describe it this way? What kind of beasts are these? Huh? Okay, so there's a lion, bear, leopard, dreadful beast. What do they have in common? Huh? Say. They're predators, right? They're predatory animals. Now, why does God mention these as predatory beasts? Well, we see that predatory beasts, they tend to describe a character that is more warlike, more persecuting-like. And we see that that's definitely fitting picture for these kingdoms, because what we see is that these kingdoms are at war with one another, right? And we see in Daniel chapter 7, if you turn there with me, Daniel chapter 7, we see that Daniel sees these beasts come out of the sea, and he's looking at the beasts, but the angel is trying to show Daniel to focus on something else. And if you read the whole chapter 7, you're going to notice, what does the angel, or what does Daniel give more time to describe? Do you guys know? Is he taking time to describe the lion? No. Is he taking time to describe the bear? No. Is he taking time to describe the leopard with 4 heads? No. Daniel's focusing on the 4th beast. The dreadful beast that's on the bottom. But also more than that, the description in Daniel 7, the one that has the most description is the little horn that comes up out of among the 10. Okay? And so we see in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, Daniel was looking at this fearful beast, but it says in verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous things. Okay, so we see in Daniel chapter 2, is there any mention of a little horn? The image? No. But in Daniel chapter 7, it repeats, but it also enlarges, giving more details, telling us about a little horn that comes up. This little horn comes up among the 10 horns and plucks up 3 of the horns out. What does this mean? Well, we're going to take a look at that. What is this little horn? And I'm going to actually tell you that this little horn plays a huge role. So repeating and enlarging. See Daniel 2. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Pete, which is the papacy. And then we look at Daniel chapter 7, the beasts, but then we also notice the little horns mentioned. Okay, now when you go to Daniel chapter 8, it's interesting. Daniel 2, the metal image. Daniel 7, the beasts. Daniel 8, what's next? Daniel 8 is talking about two beasts. Not four, but two. A ram and a goat. And they're fighting each other. And the goat kills the ram with this prominent horn. And now horns in the Bible, in Bible prophecy, represents what? Do you guys know what a horn represents? A king, that's right. A horn represents a king. And in Daniel chapter 8, it tells us who that ram was. That ram was Medo-Persia, which makes sense because it had two horns, right? Medo-Persia, two horns, right? And Greece had that one prominent horn, which was a goat. And the goat, it was pictures of the goat impaling the ram with its horn. In some pictures, artisan pictures. And we see that with the goat, after he destroys the ram, that prominent horn falls off. That horn, which represents the king of Greece. Who was the king of Greece? You guys know? Alexander the Great, exactly. Very young emperor. He died, and when he died, the prophecy goes on to say that four little horns came out of its place. So four horns sprouted out of that one place where the horn fell off. Four other ones came out, which represents his generals. Alexander had no living heir to the kingdom, so his generals had to fight and divide the kingdom in four quadrants. So that's what's depicted there. But out of the four came a little horn. Now the question is, I'm going to ask you, and I want you to think about it. I'm not going to ask, if I forget to give you the answer, please remind me later. But why in Daniel chapter 7 we have predatory beasts, but in Daniel chapter 8 we have a ram and a goat? Anyone have the answer? Okay, if not, remind me later and I'll tell you why, okay? Because I'm going to jump ahead of myself if we go into it now. But we notice in Daniel chapter 8, it mentions a ram and a goat and a little horn. Okay, so little horn is mentioned in chapter 7 and 8. So you notice it's repeating more detail. Chapter 8 is very significant that these two animals are mentioned along with the little horn with more detail. So this repeat and enlarge keeps happening throughout the book of Daniel. When you get to chapter 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, the rest of the chapters in Daniel, there's no more symbols. There's no more animals or things like that describe it. It's all plain. Like Daniel chapter 11, it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south fighting one another. And in Daniel chapter 12, it talks about Michael, the archangel, standing. Right? And the time of the end begins. And so, the focus that I'm noticing here in Daniel, that they really want us to focus on is the little horn. And so, what is the little horn? Okay, we're going to take a look at Daniel chapter 7. And in verse 8 it says, this little horn plucked out 3 horns by the roots. Behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. So you see that horn? It's kind of hard to see, isn't it? It shows eyes of a man and mouth of a man, right? And then we see that this little horn also speaks great words, and blasphemies. It changes times and laws. It persecutes God's people for time, and half a time. We'll discuss that more later. But let's take a look at where this horn rises from. It rises from among the 10 horns. What does that mean? It rises from the 10 horns. It's different from all the preceding kingdoms. Eyes and mouth like a man. And it plucks up 3 out of the 10 horns. So number 2 and number 5 are kind of similar. So this little horn comes up among the 10 horns on this beast. Okay? And this little horn, what does it do? It plucks out 3 horns out of the 10. So what does that mean? First of all, what does that beast represent? The beast, the dreadful beast with 10 horns. What does that beast represent? First of all, what does a beast represent? I didn't ask that question. What does a beast represent? A kingdom, right? Or a nation. Good. So, this little horn comes out of which beast? The 4th beast. That's right. The 4th beast. It comes out of the 4th beast, right? And this little horn comes up, but it says that this little horn plucks out 3. So that 4th beast represents what nation? Rome. Exactly, Rome. Now, it's interesting, when Rome progressed, Rome did not really fall, per se, but Rome broke apart. In fact, it broke apart into 10 barbarian tribes. And these 10 barbarian tribes were what's left of the crumbling Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was trying very hard to keep the empire together, but it was these 10 tribes were all that was remaining. This little horn represents what? The papacy. Now the papacy needed to gain full world control, but there's a problem. Out of the 10 barbarian tribes, 7 were in support for the little horn, or the Pope, or the papacy, but 3 were Arian tribes, which means that they were against the papacy. And so, in order for this little horn, or the papacy, to gain full power and dominance, it had to eliminate 3 of these tribes. Now, it's very interesting. When you look at it, oh, you can't see it very well here, but you see that in the white, these are the tribes, the 7 tribes that were left. The other 3 were uprooted. That means they're extinct. They no longer exist, right? The ones that were extinct or uprooted by the papacy were the Huruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals. These 3 tribes were eliminated. But it's interesting, when you look at the ones that remain, they still exist today. But they have different names. Like the Visigoths are the Spaniards, come from Spain. The Anglo-Saxons come from England. The Franks come from France. The Alemanni, this represents Germany. The Burgundians, Switzerland. The Lombards, Italy, and Suevi, Portugal. So you see that even to this day, are these nations still in existence? Yes, they are. And it's really remarkable how prophecy confirms this. And we go on to see more characteristics of the little horn. It speaks great words and blasphemies. So, oh, I'm sorry. Before we go there, speaks great words and blasphemies. it has eyes and mouth like a man. So in other words, when it has eyes and mouth like a man, it's representing that a man will be at the head of the papacy. And is there a man at the head of the papacy? Yes. Which is the Pope, right? The Pope. And he's the man that represents the system. And he speaks great words and blasphemies. Okay, what is blasphemy? What blasphemy is? Yeah, take the prerogatives of God, saying that I am God, right? Or even saying that you can forgive sins like God can forgive sins, right? This is what they claim that they can do. That's why people go into confession, because they confess behind the curtain to the priest, saying, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. And they confess their sins to this man, who they see as God, right? Which is blasphemy. And we see that also, this little horn will attempt to change times and laws. How does the little horn change times and laws? First of all, it changes times. How does it change times? Okay. Close to that. Did someone say it? Sabbath, that's right, Sabbath. They changed Sabbath to what? Sunday. You know, it's very interesting when you look at their catechism, the Catholic catechism, they don't deny it. It's very plainly stated there. They say, which day is the seventh day? They say, Saturday is the seventh day. They say, why do we keep Sunday instead of Saturday? And they say, we, the Catholic Church, not with biblical authority, but we made the change. Because we were allowed to. They said. They didn't base it on scripture. They just said that we could do it just because we did it. And they admit it. They don't hide that. So they changed times. Seventh-day Sabbath to Sunday. Right? Saying that that's the day you should worship. How did they change laws? Wow. Yeah, very close. Yeah, that's right. Now the Catholic Catechism also shows this. And by the way, you can get this catechism at the ABC bookstore or anywhere else, online, whatever. But the Catechism says, first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Second commandment, you guys know what the second commandment is? Thou shalt not bow down to any graven images. They got rid of that one. Why? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They have, like the statue of Mary, they have the saints, and they keep those saints there and worship them. And if you don't believe me, in the early Roman Church, did you know that the saints that they call Saint Peter, Saint John, Saint Mary, all these names that they gave, they Christianized them, but they're actually gods from Rome. Like Peter, Saint Peter is the god of Saturn, and Mary, I think, is the god of like this female goddess, like Athena or something like that. But they renamed them Christian names, but it's still idol worship. And they said, hey, we can't get rid of this stuff, so let's get rid of the second commandment. So they got rid of the second commandment, but there's a problem. There's 9. So how do you come up with 10? So they go down to the very bottom where it says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods or thy wife. They split that into 2. They say, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's stuff. Perfect. Now we got 10. That's how they fixed it. And they bumped everything else up. Right? And so that's how they changed laws. And this is actually something that is not hidden. This is actually something you can see in their catechism. So let's see what else we can find out. The little horn persecutes God's people for time, times, and half a time. Okay? And we see that time period, time times half the time is a very important time period. In fact, we're going to be focusing on that during the latter half of this presentation. Based on Daniel and Revelation, we see that the devil hates three things. The devil hates God. He hates God. He also hates God's law. And according to Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, he also hates those that keep his commandments, God's people. So, surprisingly enough, in Daniel chapter 7, we see these three things at stake. Okay, so if you can turn with me to Daniel chapter 7, we see that the little horn is doing what? Let's take a look. And by the way, in Daniel chapter 7, the key focus is not on the beasts. The key focus is on who? The little horn. That's right. And so we see the little horn speaking great things, verse 9. But it's interesting, throughout the chapter, as the little horn is doing something,